Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Nevada basin. The light sharp and colorless as it hit the dry ground. Cole Maddox rode along the familiar trail toward his ranch with slow, steady movements. His horses stewing softly in the dust that lifted in a thin clouds around them. The air felt dry and rough in his throat, and each breath carried the taste of grit. He shifted slightly in the saddle, rubbing a hand across his jaw where dust had gathered, trying to fight off the dull ache in his shoulders from a long day's ride. His eyes stayed on the line of cottonwoods in the distance. The markers he always checked first when coming home. They usually meant nothing more than the end of the day. But today, something tugged at his attention. A quick flicker of movement appeared near the split rail fence. He frowned and slowed the horse without thinking, leaning forward just a bit. The movement wasn't shaped like livestock and didn't shift like a coyote. It stayed low, too still, too quiet. A small knot formed in his stomach. His land rarely saw visitors, and certainly not strangers without warning. As he approached, the shape sharpened in the evening light. A girl, maybe 8 years old, crouched near the fence. Her arms hugged her chest tightly. Her thin frame trembled with shallow breaths. She looked up only when his shadow crossed over her. Her eyes, white and dark, full of panic and exhaustion. Her face was strewn with dust. Her lips cracked, her hair tangled with dry grass. Her dress, a patchy beadwork at the edges, was torn and singed badly at the waist with a strip of leather as if she had been running and grabbed anything she could to keep moving. Cole stopped the horse and slid down slowly, boots landing solid on the ground. He kept his hands visible, palms open, trying not to show how fast his heartbeat had risen. He wasn't afraid of the child. He was afraid of what made her look like that. "You hurt?" he asked, keeping his tone level and low. She didn't speak. She just shook her head once, small and stiff. Her eyes flicked past him toward the hills, here. Breathing breaking for a second, as though she expected someone or something to follow. Cole followed her gaze and felt a thin line of tension pull through his back. Whatever scared her wasn't far away in her mid-distance. He knew that look. He had seen in adults fleeing raids, in soldiers who hadn't slept, and now in the eyes of a child who looked like she had walked farther than her body could handle. He crouched a little to meet her eye level. "You alone out here?" No answer, just another fragile shake of her head. Meaning, no, she wasn't alone. Or no, she didn't want to say. He didn't press her. Pressing people in that state usually made things worse. She needed safety first, not questions. "All right?" he said quietly. "Let's get you out of the cold." When he reached for her, she flinched first, her shoulders jumping. But she didn't pull away. She was past running. Cole lifted her carefully, surprised by how little weight she had, and set her on the horse. Her hands clung to the saddle horn immediately, small fingers gripping as if the leather was the only thing holding her steady. He walked beside the horse instead of climbing up. He wanted her to feel control, not pressure. Her breathing slowed, but she kept glancing behind them, each time, making his chest tighten a little more. Something bad had happened. Something recent. The cabin came into view as the sun dropped lower. Smoke rose from the chimney from the fire he had left banked that morning. Normally, that sight eased him. Today, it didn't. Not with a child he didn't know, leaning weakly against the saddle, and danger pressing in from the unknown. By the time they reached the small porch, the girl's grip had loosened. Fatigue taking over. Cole lifted her down gently. She let him, her body cold and limp against his arm. Inside, he set her near the stove and worked quickly, stirring the remaining embers until heat pushed into the room. The girl didn't speak. She watched him with that same silent fear, as if she expected him to turn her away or ask questions she wasn't ready to face. He didn't. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled a chair closer to the warmth. "You're safe here," he said, unsure if she believed him, but needing to say it anyway. Her eyes softened just enough for him to see relief break through the fear. Cole stood near the window, staring out at the fading light, watching the hills while she drifted towards sleep. He kept turning over possibilities. Lost family, raiders, Porzurs, a tribe nearby. But each thought tightened his chest more. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who might come looking. But he knew this. The child was terrified, exhausted, and needed someone to stand between her and whatever she'd fled. And for tonight, that someone had to be him. The cabin warmed slowly as dusk settled across the basin. The orange light from the stove pushing back the cold in uneven patches along the floor. Cole kept the flames steady, feeding the fire small pieces of kindling so the heat wouldn't startle the girl or make noise that might worry her. She sat wrapped in the blanket he'd given, legs pulled close to her chest, her eyes flicking around the room as if she were mapping every corner for safety. He moved carefully, avoiding sudden sounds, pulling a tin cup from the shelf and filling it with warm water. When he handed it to her, she hesitated before taking it, her fingers trembling more from nerves than exhaustion. "You can drink," he said quietly. She brought the cup to her lips, sipping slowly, her throat working hard with each swallow. Cole watched for signs of illness or injury, but all he saw was a child who had pushed herself far beyond what she should have. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She paused, gripping the cup tightly. Her voice, when it came, was thin and quiet. "Ila," he nodded once, letting her see he wasn't going to push her for more. "I'm Cole." Isa dipped her head, acknowledging him, Teen lowered her gaze back to the cup. He prepared food next, simple broth and a small piece of bread softened in warm water. The cabin filled with a light, earthy smell that eased the dryness in the air. Isa watched every motion. Cautious but curious, her expression shifting between fear and relief. When he set the bowl in front of her, she froze again, waiting, judging, trying to decide if it was safe. Only when he stepped back a little did she allow herself a small bite. Hiya moved slowly at first, then faster once she realized she could keep it down. Cole leaned against the table, arms crossed loosely, keeping enough distance that she didn't feel trapped. He let her eat without questions. If she wanted to speak, she would. After a few minutes, she stopped and looked toward the door, her brow tightening. "You expecting Zomione?" Cole asked in a low voice. She shook her head quickly, fear returning, her breath catching slightly. Cole followed her gaze to the door and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. He didn't know who or what she feared, but he recognized the way she kept checking the shadows. Like someone who had run from something still close behind her. Without saying anything, he walked to the door and slid the bolt into place with a soft click. Isa jumped at the sound, then relaxed slowly when she understood what he'd done. Her shoulders loosened and her breaths evened out. She finished the last of the bread and set the bowl down carefully, almost apologetically as if she worried he might be upset by the use of his food. "You did fine," he reassured her. "Isa reached into the small pouch tied poorly at her waist. She pulled out a woven bracelet, thin, worn, decorated with beads that had clearly been touched 1,000 times. She held out to him with both hands, her expression serious. Cole didn't take it at first. You don't have to give me anything. She pushed it forward again, her chin lifting. Slightly, insisting. He accepted it, feeling his texture. Soft threads. Chipped beads, something made with care. Something important enough to carry when she ran. Thank you, he said quietly. Isa nodded once, satisfied, then wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. Cole laid an extra quilt near the stove and gestured toward it. You can sleep here. It's warmest. She moved without argument, settling onto the blanket, her eyes still tracking him even as she lay down. Cole sat at the table afterward, sharpening a small knife out of habit more than need, keeping the scrape of metal steady and soft so it wouldn't unsettle her. She watched him until her eyes finally drifted shut. Once here, breathing settled into the slow rhythm of sleep, Cole looked toward the door again, his jaw clenched. He had taken in a stranger, a child carrying fear that didn't come from nowhere. Something or someone had driven her here. And whatever it was, he had a feeling it wasn't finished. The sun came up harsh and direct the next morning, pushing a pale light across the open basin and slipping through the small cabin window in a single sharp line. Cole woke early. The kind of early that came from unease rather than routine. He sat up slowly on his cot, listening for anything unusual. Movement outside, hoofbeats, voices, but the world stayed quiet except for the steady crackle of the stove he had kept burning low through the night. Isa was still asleep near the warmth, curled tightly under the quilt, her breathing soft and even. Seeing her rest so deeply eased him a little, but not enough to settle the tension in his chest. He pulled on his boots, shrugged into his worn coat, and stepped outside with his rifle in hand. Cold air hit him immediately, sharp and still. The ground held a thin layer of frost that crunched under his steps as he moved toward the fence line. He scanned the horizon. First, habit, instincts, and caution all working together. Then dropped his gaze to the dirt. Footprints, more than he expected, not from Isa alone, and not old enough to ignore. Cole crouched, touching the edge of a boot track that cut deep into the ground. It was fresh. Yesterday afternoon, maybe evening, too close to the cabin for coincidence. Another print overlapped it, lighter, but matching direction. 2 men at least, possibly more. They had come near his land, walked along the fence, then turned back toward the ridge. His jaw tightened. He didn't like strangers approaching his property without making themselves known, especially when a frightened child appeared on the same day. He straightened, eyes narrowing at the distant hills. Whoever made those tracks had been moving quickly, searching. A flash of anger stirred low in his chest. Not loud, not wild, but controlled. The kind he hadn't felt since losing his family. Someone had scared Isla badly enough to send her running through the basin. Someone had followed too close. He headed back to the cabin, boots crunching steadily over the frost, and paused at the door to calm himself. Isa didn't need to see anger. Not even directed elsewhere. She had seen enough fear to last her a long time. Inside, the warmth hit again. Isa was awake, sitting up with a quilt around her shoulders. She looked at him with questioning eyes, not panicked like yesterday, but guarded. You sleep all right? He asked softly. She nodded once, but her gaze drifted toward the door as if she could sense something unsettled in him. Cole set the rifle against the wall and knelt near her so she didn't feel towered over. "You're safe here," he said, keeping his tone even. "Nothing's coming in." But Isa wasn't reassured. She tightened the blanket and looked toward the window, her breath picking up. She had seen him. Noticed the tracks. Even without words, she could tell something was wrong. Cole debated telling her everything he'd found. But she was too young, too raw from whatever she'd fled. So he said, "Only some men passed by. They're gone now." Her shoulders jumped slightly, fear hitting hard enough to shake her control. She clenched her hands, breathing faster. Cole didn't reach out. He knew better than a crowd someone when panic rose, but he softened his voice. "They didn't see you," he added. "And they didn't come inside. You're safe." Isa swallowed hard, then nodded, though her eyes stayed wet. He stood and pulled out a small piece of bread and warm broth, setting them on the table. "Eat what you can. We'll take things slow today." She moved toward the food, still watching him in case he left again. To give her something grounding, something small and steady, he pointed to the bracelet she had given him last night. "This yours?" he asked gently. She nodded again. "I'll keep it safe," he said. "You don't have to worry about that." Something in her expression softened. Not trust. Not yet, but a small shift toward comfort. After breakfast, Cole took her outside for a moment, holding her hand loosely so she could pull away if she wanted. The cold air hit her face, and she flinched, but she didn't back away. He showed her the horse, the chickens, the yard. He didn't mention the tracks. She didn't ask, but every few minutes, she glanced toward the ridge, toward where the tracks led, toward where danger might still be waiting. Cole saw it each time, and each time he felt the same steady resolve built stronger in him. Whoever had chased her, whoever had made her run until she nearly collapsed at his fence, they wouldn't get anywhere near her again. The afternoon light thinned as the hours passed, settling into that